Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are talking about the last section of our Hitler unit, which is the aims and results of policies. Now this whole section and the next following videos are all going to be focused on specific policies or specific people who enacted those policies and what their goal was, what the result was. So in each of these videos, we're going to be breaking them down on two different parts here. Aims, as we see up here, and results. What is the goal? What is the objective? What do we want? Versus what was the outcome? Did we meet it? Did we not meet it? Why didn't we meet it? Of a policy. And these are all going to be focused on specific categories, all of which is going to be domestic. So as we look at this first bullet point, it says aims and impacts of domestic economic, political, cultural, and social policies. So this means the following videos are all not only going to be focusing on what the goal of these policies are, and the results of what these policies are, but also all of these are going to be domestic policies. This is not going to be about how Hitler or how Germany or how the Nazi Party invaded other countries. It's not going to be about World War II. It's not going to be about any of those things. All of these videos are going to focus on how specific policies and how the country and what the country was like through the result of these policies. So when we look at the first example here, aims and impacts of domestic at home, domestic economic policies, this is looking at, all right, what policies did Hitler do? What policies did Hildemar Schnatt? What policies did Hermann Göring do to recover the economy, right? Because they're coming in power just after the Great Depression. Aims and impacts of the political policies. What political policies were passed and moved and made to impact the political climate, the different political parties that existed in Germany. Aims and the impacts of domestic cultural policies. How did the Nazi government, how did Hitler, how did the Hitler Youth, for instance, shift the culture of the country? How it changed what it was prior versus to what it was under them, right? Like a shift between being a open environment for LGBTQ plus and then being a closed environment for LGBTQ plus. And the last one is aims and impacts on social policies. Now, cultural policies and social policies are very different. Cultural policies have to do with the overarching environment, the overarching acceptance among groups, among regions, among the citizens. Social is how the citizens interact with each other. What policies were enacted that impacted the way two people can talk with each other, hold business with each other, marry, things like that. So when we're looking at culture versus when we're looking at social, we're looking at two very different things. The next bullet point, the aims and impacts of policies on women and minorities. So these are going to be very different from what we've experienced thus far. So when we're looking at these policies, we're going to look at specific policies that were enacted for women and then policies for minorities. This is where we talk about the Holocaust, right? When we talk about minorities, in this case, we're looking at the way Hitler treated a smaller group rather than a larger group. Right? This is different than opposition because it wasn't common for members of the Jewish community, for members of the Romani, the Black German, the homosexuals, the Freemasons, and so on, and the Romani, as we will see in that video. They didn't really stand up to it. They didn't really try to oppose him, which is why when we talked about opposition, we do not talk about the Holocaust. Those are two very different things. And we're going to get deeply into this as we move on. And the last bullet point is a very interesting one. The last bullet point is authoritarian control and the extent to which it was achieved. So what that last bullet point is really asking is, Did Hitler, did the Nazi Party, did Nazi Germany fully control the country? This is a very interesting bullet point because it's going to ask you to reflect on not only these two bullet points, right? The aims and economic policies, sorry, the aims and impacts of policies, but they're also going to ask you about everything else we heard in the second section, right? It's going to ask us about opposition, use of force, propaganda, legal methods. It's going to ask about foreign policy. It's going to ask about all these things. So that last bullet point is going to be either the second longest or the longest video in this series. It'll only rival the second bullet point, the impact of policies on women and minorities, because it tends to be a little bit more complex, not complicated, complex. But this is the last final section. We should have 7 videos for this section, and let's get started.